So now we're going to take a look at what we do with Django to handle logging users into and out of our application. So we talked about sessions recently, and making a session is not the same as being logged in. Logging in actually changes data in the session. Logging in general, the most basic way of logging in depends on the existence of a session, and logging in is putting data into the session about the current user and their name and their email, and then logging out is removing it. In the session, you could have multiple users, log in with one user, log out, log in with a different user, log out. If you're just in the same browser, you're going to end up with the same session, just associated with different users. So remember, sessions and login are not the same thing. Just like cookies and sessions are not the same thing, sessions and login are not the same thing. But they all build on each other. Sessions build on cookies, and login builds on sessions. So to make this all work, you have to add to your installed apps all the Django support for all this login and logout stuff. Now, if you automatically built your project and you got a settings.py that they're going to just put this in automatically. So this is just so you know when you're looking at it where it is that all this magic functionality comes from. It comes from this installed apps. Also, for the login and logout, you're going to have to add a path to your project-wide. So DJ for eSamples, DJ for eSamples, urls.py. This is not in any of your applications. This is in your Django project, and you add a path, and there's a bunch of URLs, and that gets all registered, and a whole bunch of wonderful magic happens at that point. And so that's how these URLs are activated in your Django project, so the applications. So the way we get the URLs to the login and logout features is we use the reverse. We've been using reverse all along. Reverse is the way we look up for a particular view. And in some urls.py, matter of fact, in that django.contrib.auth URLs, in that there is a name equals. And so there's a view in there that they've got that we didn't write, and it has a name equals, and has name equals login and a name equals logout. And so we can do a reverse lookup like we would of any of our views that we might have. Say, give me the URL in this Django project for the view named login or the view named logout. And it's pretty simple. You could even probably hard code these, but maybe the route isn't exactly account /, right? And so maybe you called them something else. And so that's why we use the reverse to look these things up. And so that's just a convenient way of doing it. Now, one of the things about logging in is sometimes you have an application and there's like a login button, but sometimes you just have pages that are protected by login. And then when you go to a page, it says, oh wait, you got to log in first. And then after you log in, you'll notice it typically just takes you right back to the page that you wanted to see. So you might bookmark a page when you're logged in, and then you log out, and then you click on that bookmark page, but that requires that you be logged in. So you're going to go to the page, and then when you're done logging in, you want to come right back to that page. And so that's using redirecting, but it's redirecting after login is successful or after logout is successful. Logouts are almost always successful. And so there's a parameter that we can add, a get parameter that we can add, and it's the next equals, and what we do is we give it a path. And so here's a little bit of code that we're going to play with in my sample codes under the authz project, under the authz application. And so I got a bunch of views, and I'm going to give them some names so that we can play with them. So these are just the urls.py. So if you take a look in this main.html template, you see a whole bunch of things. You see this next feature in action. So here's a couple things we can do. So there is this user object that in a sense is passed in. You don't have to do anything to pass it in. There's this user object that sits there in your template context that's automatically. We'll talk later about how you can sort of inject into every template certain little things that you got to inject. But the system injects this user. There is an attribute called isAuthenticated, which is true or false, to say whether you're not logged in or are logged in. And so if we see it, we say, oh, what's their person's full name, user.email, user.id. This user ID is the primary key. We might actually have later we'll have a foreign key that goes into the user table, and we need to know what the primary key of the current user is so we can populate our foreign key. So when we have a row and it's owned by such and so, we're going to actually put a foreign key into a table that we didn't even create. But the thing I'm talking about now is you can get a URL, that URL tag, that's looking up a name of a view. Logout is the name of a view. Login is the name of a view. And then we have this question mark next equals. That's the parameter to say when you're all done with that login or logout, go back to this particular URL. Okay? And so that says go to the URL that's in the authz application, the view named open. And so that's one way of doing it. Another way, let's say in login, we're going to get the login URL and send ourselves back to the request path. The request is another one of these things that's dropped in automatically for us. That is the current URL of the view we're at. So in a sense, this is a contraction that says go ahead and go to login, and when you're back, come right back here. So login will log in and then redirect back to this page that we're on, whatever the page is, because this is going to be, this little main.html is used in a couple of my different views. So request.path is like come back here. So that's a good pattern to know, to just say log in and come back to this current path when you're all done. And so here's just a bunch of connections to this thing, and we have here's just all my links. And I have a couple of things. I have some no login required pages just to play around, and then I have one that's protected by hand in Python, and then one's required by a login mixin, and then I sort of dump all that data, and I think I showed you that one already. So here is one of them, right? I showed that. That's what this all looks like. You can see that these links have the next in there. This is how it turns out to be. You get accounts login. Oops, come back. You go to accounts login next equals authz open, and that's basically, I'm in this file right now, I'm in that URL, and that says go ahead and log me in and then come back to this URL, to the authz open. Here's an example of the logout URL with a next setup in it. And so up next, we're going to talk about not just how to get the users to go to the login page, but how to configure the login page.